are really privileged to have this group with us. It is a group that really, in a strange way, of course, no one really wants to be a member of. It already has too many members. The journey of hope from violence to healing is comprised of individuals who have lost family members to the scourge of homicide. And I and no one would wish this terror on anyone. So it is accurate to say that no one wants to become a member of this organization. The goal, of course, is for the members of the organization to see itself end. The organization is also comprised of former death row inmates who were wrongly accused, falsely convicted, and horrifically incarcerated before they were in fact freed from an unjust imprisonment. And I am quite certain no one wants to ever be in that situation.
The Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing is an organization that is led by murder victim family members. And we travel around the country and around the world, and we share our stories of from violence to healing. And we talk about how the death penalty has absolutely nothing to do with the healing that murder victim family members need when a loved one has been killed, and how it continues that cycle of violence and it creates more murder victim family members. And as we do our speaking tours, we're joined by family members that have loved ones on death row. We have two people that are on the journey with us tonight, Terry Steinberg, who has a son on death row in Virginia, and Sandrina Georges Skinner, whose husband Hank Skinner is on death row here in the state of Texas. And there's also other people here in this room that have loved ones on death row. We're also joined by people that have been sentenced to death for crimes that they didn't commit. Over 130 people have been sentenced to death by various states in this country for crimes they didn't commit, sentenced to death, and they were innocent. Fortunately, they were able to prove their innocence before their execution dates took place. And so they share what it's like to be on death row for them and for their families for a crime that they didn't commit.
Words cannot describe the hatred and the anger that engulfed my body, my mind, and my soul when I learned of how my sister was found. She was found lying in a bed in a pool of blood with a 3-foot pickaxe left embedded in her heart. And just a few months later, they found my father. And he was lying at the bottom of a staircase at his home in Seabrook, Texas. And his head was literally severed from his body. He suffered a shotgun blast at almost point-blank range from a double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun. I tried everything I could to lose that pain, to lose that anger, and to lose that hatred. I took drugs, I took alcohol, and nothing would stop the pain. Nothing would take the hate away. Nothing would replace that emptiness, the loss of my sister. As I said earlier, I come from a small family. I had one sister. Through all of that, I simply said to Carla, Carla, whatever comes out of this, I just want you to know that I forgive you and that I don't hold anything against you. And at that point, I felt a great weight was lifted off my shoulders. That anger and that want and that desire to leave that pickaxe in that vicious monster went away. Slowly but surely, all those images, all that anger, you know, they say they're monsters up there on death row and that they're hideous. Well, those images started going away and I started to see a human being. And on February the 3rd, 1998, I witnessed the execution of Carla Faye Tucker. And I was there at a request of Carla Faye. And in doing so, I became the first murder victim family member that stood in the friends and family room for the inmate. And when I stood in that room that night, I stood with Dana Brown, who's Carla's husband. And I stood in that same room with Carrie Weeks, who's Carla's sister. And what I learned that night is that it didn't change anything. The streets weren't any safer the next morning. Sun didn't shine any brighter. My sister didn't come back from heaven. We killed more people down there in the Walls unit than in the United States. And if deterrence worked, how come we got the high murder rate that we got in Texas? Can't buy into it, folks.
This is an innocent, defenseless little girl, and I was her mother, and it was only normal and natural that I would want to avenge anything that happened. And I knew I'd have something to say about what happened to him when he got caught, this kidnapper. And I wanted to make sure that he paid and paid plenty. And in Montana at that time, the sentence would have been the death penalty. And I wanted to see this guy swing. Middle of the night, exactly 1 year to the minute that he had taken my little Susie out of his tent, out of our tent, the kidnapper called me at my home in Michigan. And he woke me up out of a sound sleep, but I knew who it was right away. And it became real clear he was really just calling to taunt me. You wanted to talk to me? Here I am. But I'm the one that's calling the shots, lady, and you're the one that's over the barrel. But in spite of the fact that he was being very smug and nasty, to my own amazement, I was filled with genuine feelings of concern and compassion for him. It was no longer something that I knew that I should do, that I had chosen to do, but it was real. My heart was filled with a desire to reach out to this man and help him. And he wasn't expecting that. He was expecting me to be angry. He wanted me to get hysterical so he could hang up and leave me hanging. And so he gentled down, and he stayed on the phone for a long time. And when I told him that I was praying for him, and that I asked him if there was anything that I could do to help him, he broke down and he sobbed and he sobbed. And he said, I wish this burden could be lifted from me. So we have to find a better way. And I say very clearly, loud and clear, don't kill in my name, don't kill in Susie's name, don't kill with my tax dollars. But that's what's being done in your name and your tax dollars. And so if it doesn't fit your values and your principles, then you start writing those letters, and you start demonstrating, and you start letting your legislators know how you feel about it, because the politicians will go where the votes are. And so you got to show them what the votes are thinking.
In December of 1982, Pam was found raped and murdered in her home. The police, we know now, did a professional job in their investigation. There weren't any of the misbehaviors that sometimes we hear about when it involves the police, when it's their family, the kind of activities that can go on, the pressure that's applied to people to talk to them. They didn't do any of that. And the second encounter wasn't professional as the first had been. This time I was taken by force. And over a 3-day period at the police department was subjected to physical and psychological violence. And my protests fell on deaf ears. They knew who I was and how I lived. It had gone unsolved, the crime, for 3 years, and they had, I suppose, that level of frustration that we would have in that position as well. And they took it out on me. At the end of those 3 days, a representative for the district attorney's office in Oklahoma City told me that he thought I was a liar, and that if I did not tell him who killed Pam Willis immediately, that I would take his place in court. And he kept his word. In May of 1985, I was charged with first-degree capital murder. As soon as I got to death row and took a look around and saw what I saw and come to know the men who were there, I knew that I had been lied to by my government and those people in my community who are supposed to keep us well informed and keep us protected from this kind of conduct. We are always told that the men who go to death row are the worst of the worst, men who have committed crimes so heinous that they have forfeited their right to live. Before I was finally released from custody in May of 2007. And I can't describe to you how good it felt to walk out those doors and hug my mother for the first time in 2 decades. And I think out of everything that happened, everything that the police did to me, that the district attorney did, pales in comparison to what they did to the Willis family. We are told that's why we have a multi-billion-dollar criminal justice system, that if anything bad ever happens to us, our government will come speak in our name, and they will do so faithfully. That they will prosecute the law with honor, they will seek the truth, and that they will seek justice for victims. And in this case, they did not do that.
On the morning of April the 19th, Julie got up, went to work at 8 o'clock, had an appointment with a Mexican man at 9 a.m. that couldn't speak English. She left the first floor of the federal building and walked to the back of the building and walked to the front of the building to the Social Security waiting room to get her client. He had been brought by a friend of his that was bilingual. Julie and the two men had returned about halfway through the building when the bomb went off at 9:02. That was Wednesday morning, and all 3 bodies were found together on Saturday. The only thing that separated the Ryder truck with the 6,000-pound bomb and the Social Security waiting room was the sidewalk, about 20 feet. There were 24 clients in Social Security that morning. They all died. And in spite of my feelings, I knew that someday I needed to go tell that man that I truly cared how he felt and did not blame him or his family for what his son had done. We were talking probably for 5 minutes, and I noticed the largest photo on the wall was an 8x10 of Tim. It was kind of hanging almost behind me. Well, I kept glancing at that photo during the time we were talking for probably an hour and a half or so, and then I started feeling self-conscious that I had looked many times, and of course they have seen me each time I looked. And finally I felt the need to say something. I never looked at the photo with anger. I guess I looked at it with not understanding why he, what got into him that he killed Julie and 167 other people. Well, after this long silence ended at the kitchen table, Bill looked up at the wall and very simply said, "That's Timmy's high school graduation picture." But when he said that, there was this great big tear that rolled out of his right eye down his cheek. And I could see at that moment that this father could cry for this son. At that moment, Tim was in prison in Florence, Colorado, had been sentenced to death. Bill knew he needed him desperately, but there wasn't a thing that he could do for him. Bill McVeigh is never able to say anything positive about Tim. Tim is a good kid. He was a good kid in high school, went into the Army. He was a good soldier. We gave him 3 medals. We sent him off to a war called Desert Storm in 1991. He and Terry Nichols served in the same unit together. They both came back with PTSD. Tim worse than Terry. We took Tim McVeigh out of his cage that Monday morning, and we killed him. And there was nothing about that process that brought me any peace or any feel-good. Another thing that happened that Monday morning is Bill McVeigh and I had one thing in common. We had both buried our children. They both died in very different ways, but we had buried our children. It's difficult when your parents die. You have to go to the hilltop and you bury them. When your children die, you bury them in your heart. And it's forever. It never goes away. Thanks, guys.
It's not hard to understand the rage in this country when 30,000 innocent people a year are murdered in senseless violence at the hands of our fellow citizens. This is a disease. It's not a problem, it's a disease.